Okay, so I just want to talk very briefly about what's taking place with women. Because a lot of times as Black women, we're ignoring the bigger picture. And be clear, there are other spaces where you have women saying that certain things are not acceptable, right? So you have certain feminists who have been labeled as TERFs. So let me type it in here. Hey, Divested Noir. Right? So a TERF is what's called a trans exclusionary or basically a trans exclusionary radical feminist, right? Because since at least the 70s, you've had women saying, well, wait a minute, we're women. So why are we including these people in our conversations? And the term TERF is kind of a pejorative. So it's used to demonize biological women who say, okay, you came into this world in a male body. We're talking about what we go through as women. So in this moment, the conversation is not about you. So if you think about, here we go. So if you think about women like J.K. Rowling, for example, right? Since we have so many Black women in spaces that are supposed to be Black women, and they're saying that they want to be inclusive of other women, right? Well, you have women like J.K. Rowling who have been basically publicly flogged for saying, well, no, wait a minute. I'm a biological woman, so there's nothing wrong with me saying that there is a difference between being a person who came into this world born as a girl versus people who came into the world born as boys, right? And if you know anything about Harry Potter, that's JK's thing. And the only reason that she hasn't been canceled is because she has such a huge platform. But she's been saying for years, like, wait a minute, we don't need to exist in this space where we have to give up our status as women to make these other people comfortable. And saying that doesn't mean that we think that you should be harmed, doesn't mean that we think you don't have the right to exist. But what we are saying is your right to exist doesn't diminish our needs as women. You also had Black radical feminists in the 70s and 80s saying, what's going to happen to the meaning of Black womanhood if all of our representation comes from people who were not born as Black women? And a lot of the conversations that are taking place in Black women-centered spaces, whether you're talking about those of us who are divested, those who claim to be BWE, or other spaces, those conversations would not have public platforms without the existence of Black radical feminists. But the difference is those women were saying, well, no, like you can't get to this point where you can't acknowledge us as women. But then let's go back. Let's go back to, hold on. Let's go back to this. Because there are certain statements that people often reference, okay? But back in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken, you had Sojourner Truth saying, well, wait a minute, ain't I a woman? Like, she started the conversation about the fact that our womanhood and our femininity as Black women was being disregarded. See, people love to quote her speech. They love to quote that statement. But then when it's actually time to acknowledge our womanhood, then everyone wants to say, well, no, you have to be inclusive of other people. And it's like, hold on. Me saying I came into this world as a girl, a female. So there are certain things that I'm going to deal with that you're not going to have any awareness of if you were born in a male body. You're not going to understand it. But we got to this place as a society where it became unpopular to say that. I mean, do you know how many women have lost their jobs for saying, well, wait a minute. We don't have anything against those of you who are female presenting. Because let's be clear, if you were born in a male body and you live as a woman, you're not a woman. You're not female. You're female presenting. And there are certain things that we go through that you're not going to understand, and we need our own advocacy. We need to make sure that women's rights are protected. And there are certain things about women's rights that you're not going to understand because you were not born in our bodies. One of the issues with maternal health care is that a lot of the people driving those conversations are not people who are solely dedicated to women. People are no longer having conversations about the fact that getting pregnant, going through pregnancy, and going through childbirth is life-changing for women. Your bodies go through a lot with that. People are not having conversations about the fact that our menstrual cycles, it's not just something that happens every month. There are women showing up in hospitals all over the world halfway dead because no one's talking about the fact that, well, it affects your body if every few weeks you're dealing with blood loss. Because one of the things I asked this woman, who is no longer my doctor because I didn't like her response, but one of the things that I asked her was, if you know that as women we deal with blood loss every few weeks, why isn't it automatic to prescribe women and girls an iron supplement? And she seems like a nice person, but at the same time, I didn't like her response. But this raggedy bitch was like, well, we don't know how it's going to affect you until it happens. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Do y'all understand that if I lived in a third world country dealing with what I went through last year, I probably would have died? If our healthcare access was not protected legally, I probably would have died last year over something that was very preventable. If a doctor at some point had said, okay, well, let's put you on an iron supplement. I routinely go to my doctor's appointment. I always have a primary care doctor, a GYN. Anytime something doesn't feel right, I go to the doctors. But there's nothing in place to advocate for women and to say, okay, there's certain things that we're going to need because we go through different shit. Do you understand that people, I'll say it like this, people in other communities have lobbyists to protect what they perceive as their rights. So that's why when it comes to advertising, you can no longer say anything that is specific to a biological woman. So we're referred to as people with a cervix, people who menstruate. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm a woman. Why does your humanity have to be affirmed in a way that destroys mine? And this is what I'm saying. That's misogynistic. When you have people like Caitlyn Jenner who get awards that typically would go to women, that's offensive. That is very offensive to women. You have women who deserve those awards. You have women who have broken barriers. We live in a world now where when it comes to girls in sports, in some parts of the country, they are competing against people who were born in male bodies. And it's like, okay, even though apparently they take certain hormones, they still have their male strength. So they're fighting and attacking girls. They're going to be faster than us. They're going to perform in certain ways that are different than us because they exist in male bodies. But what's happening is you have men who want to overtake women's spaces. And the women who are supposed to be our advocates are letting this happen. Do you understand that we should be able to say that we want lobbyists and other political advocates who say, okay, there are certain things that are specific to biological women? I keep saying, y'all need to know your history. Modern day womanism is not Black women centered. And anyone who disputes that doesn't know what they're talking about. You have people in womanist spaces who are female presenting, but they were born in male bodies. You have women in womanist spaces who are not actually Black. They're women of other races. And it's like, okay, if this was a space that was created to address the fact that there are certain issues that we deal with as women who are Black or Black women, then why are you allowing people to come in who are not Black women? Why do they hold space in an environment that was originally intended for us? I said this years ago on my other channel also about feminism. The term intersectionality was created by a Black woman, Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a feminist, to address the fact that, okay, yes, we deal with gender discrimination, and in certain cases, we deal with a level of discrimination specifically because we're Black women. But now when you hear the word intersectionality, you don't think about what we deal with as Black women, because that term has been usurped and co-opted by people who are not Black women. So then when we look at the fact that we no longer have Roe versus Wade, right? So women in this country no longer have federally protected rights when it comes to reproductive issues, and everybody's shocked. I'm like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? What are you talking about? Every organization that was supposed to be here for biological women through their advocacy behind anyone who is not a biological woman. You made it a pejorative to say, like, wait, there are certain things that we're dealing with, so we have to focus on ourselves. They tried to cancel women who said, hey, wait a minute, this isn't cool. We're women, we're going through things, we can't always be inclusive. So all of their representatives, all of their lobbyists, all of the people in their organizations who were having the conversations with politicians on federal, state, and local levels were people who were more focused on pronouns. They were focused on creating a culture where you can't say that there's a difference between a biological woman versus a person who is not a biological woman. They were focused on making sure that major news networks and all of these companies could not say, woman, if you come into this world as a woman, you're a person with a cervix. You're a person with a uterus. You're a person with a menstruating body. They literally took away our ability to acknowledge our womanhood. So of course you're going to see laws being taken away left and right, as these other people are getting certain legislative protections. The money that used to go towards research for issues related to women's health is now being redirected to those other people. Do you know what that's going to mean for women who deal with issues like breast cancer, cancers of the reproductive system, certain other things that we go through as women as we age? So this is not something we deal with as much as Black women, but certain other communities of women deal with osteoporosis, all of this stuff. There are certain forms of chemotherapy that's used to treat things like breast cancer, and that chemotherapy is causing dementia in certain women. But we're not going to have the money to fix that, so that you can make sure, okay, you don't want to die from cancer, and you also want to make sure that the treatment doesn't cause you issues down the line. We no longer have those protections because all of these other people who, frankly, and no disrespect, but frankly, they're a very small subset of the population. But women make up over 50% of the population in this country. But we have to mute ourselves to make other people comfortable. And it's like, well, wait a minute. No rational woman is going to have a problem with other people, because whatever forms of humanity exist in this world came through a woman's body. So we're not going to have issues with the people we birth. We're your moms, your grandmothers, your aunts, your big sisters, your cousins. But what we are saying is you can't minimize us to make yourselves feel better. You can't strip us of our rights to make you feel better. And the other thing that's taking place, and I said this earlier, but I'm sure everyone has heard about what happened with Shanquella, right? So she was this young Black girl. She had a lot going for herself, but frankly, she was hanging around people that she should not have been. They did not deserve her, and they brutally attacked her and killed her. And you had a Black man who put out this rumor that suggested that one of the degenerates that attacked her was a trans person. No one ran with that, because to be honest with you, let me tell you something. Twitter was very well aware of the 5 people that she went with. They got their names, addresses, and everything. But you had T.S. Madison use their platform to say, well, no, it wasn't a trans person that did this to Shanquella. It was one of her own. Now, in any other situation, people existing in this world as female presenting, born in male bodies, try to suggest, okay, they're women too, right? But when we're trying to get justice for a dead Black woman, the first response is, well, no, it wasn't, from Madison's perspective, it wasn't us, it was y'all. It was very easy in that moment for Madison to make a distinction between her, and I'm trying to be respectful of people's pronouns, her group versus actual biological women. So now the entire conversation around what took place with Shanquella is being muddied with people trying to add in this whole thing about these female presenting Black men. And it's like, okay, this is not your moment. This is not your moment. This is not anybody's moment other than Shanquella's, because we're trying to figure out what happened to this girl. And we're also trying to make sure that other young Black women know, like, you got to be careful being around people. People will smile in your face and not fuck with you. And since so many of y'all like niggas, right? Jay-Z said something in a song called Caught Their Eyes. He said, I can see a side eye in my sleep. But when are Black women going to learn to do that? When are more of us going to learn how to recognize when a person does not fuck with you? When are we going to learn that it's okay for us to say, you know what, something doesn't feel right in my spirit about this person or this situation, so I'm going to back away? And you have Black women in divested spaces who are being maliciously targeted because we're saying, hey, stay away from people who don't fuck with you. And as a Black woman, the people who don't fuck with you will be Black men and the majority of Black women. And it's also going to be people in other races who think like Black men. But there's also a world of men in other races who love Black women. Like, there's this guy who's very well known in the white manosphere, and you had Black men who paid him to talk about those of you who identify as swirlers, right? So he makes the video, and a few videos later, he acknowledged, he's a white guy in Canada, he acknowledged that when it comes to dating women that are 30 plus, he prefers Black and Asian women. And you had all of these non-Black men in the comments agreeing with him because what they were saying, and no disrespect to other women, but at the same time, since they uphold people who disrespect us, then fuck them hoes. But what they were saying is Black and Asian women do not age as harshly as other groups of women. They think we're beautiful. They just don't approach us because they assume we're not interested. So they don't want to get rejected. So what I'm saying is, even when we deal with men of other races, of course, like, nobody here has to tell y'all to vet. Y'all are smart women, you're intelligent, so you know that, right? We've had conversations about doing background checks, and all that shit, right? But Black women have always had the ability to deal with men of other races. This is one on my phone right now. We've always had the ability to deal with men of other races, and we're not just talking about sex, but men who want to date you. They want to marry you. Okay? But what happens is we're a part of a group of people that demonizes us for not wanting to deal with the bullshit. To the point where they're demonizing us for saying things like, hey, back to Sojourner Truth, ain't I a woman? Is not my womanhood not as important as these other groups of women? Don't I deal with the same things as those other groups of women? And prior to all of this shit that has happened, the medical community has acknowledged that there are certain things that affect us differently when it comes to our womanhood. We start our menstrual cycles earlier and we end them later than other groups of women. So like in my case, I was 11 when my moon cycle started. I'm 41 now. When I went into severe anemia last year, my doctor was like, well, you got to realize, like, you've been dealing with bleeding every few weeks, every month for the last 30 years. And she was like, the medical community is recognizing that that is going to affect you in different ways. We're able to have children at later ages than other groups of women. So we need the advocacy to make sure that we're able to do that safely, so that we're not living in a first world country and dying from childbirth, bleeding to death from a fucking period. We deal with certain types of cancers that other groups of women don't deal with. We need to be able to have that researched so we can eradicate it and not die at these young ages. A lot of these conversations that people have about hair loss and high blood pressure with Black women, if you pay attention, a lot of Black women who deal with that are Black women who are premenopausal. So Black women who are still having menstrual cycles. Low iron affects your hair growth. Low iron can cause you to have high blood pressure because guess what? Your heart's working extra hard to pump more blood because you're losing blood every couple weeks. So if we deal with the root of the problem, which is, okay, we have a small minority of women who deal with heavier moon cycles than other groups of women. So we need to make sure that Black women can manage our periods. Guess what? Period management will end things like hair loss and high blood pressure in a lot of Black women. Do you know how overweight you have to be for your weight to impact your blood pressure? Like you have to be like obese, so like 75 plus pounds overweight. But we're not able to have those conversations. We're not able to advocate for ourselves because every time you do, you have these other people inserting themselves. Because what they're saying, and I'm going to say this and hopefully some of you will hear it, but what they're saying is that any advocacy for Black women is an affront to them. They feel insulted anytime there's an ounce of sensitivity towards us, an ounce of money and resources dedicated to us. They don't want us to have shit. And if you just look around and think about a lot of the people who have promoted these female presenting men, they've gained their success on the backs of Black women. But yet when you have a Black woman, a 25-year-old Black woman who was brutally attacked, and yes, we can say certain things about her decisions and women, but that, to me, that's a conversation that can be had while also saying, okay, we also need to get them motherfuckers that killed her. But in this moment where we live in a country where literally every 4 or 5 hours a Black woman is being killed, we need to have that moment. And the other thing that's not being said is that when it comes to data and statistics, you have a lot of areas in this country where when they send in their crime statistics, they don't use race. So it's a sobering reality, but I hope a lot of you all recognize it. It's probably more Black women being killed than, 1 every 4 or 5 hours. It's probably much more. But in predominantly Black areas, they might not include race, right? Because they live in an area where pretty much everyone is Black. So they're not going to include race when they send in that data. And the same is true for parts of the country that are predominantly white. They might not include race because most people in those areas are white. And you don't have to take my word for it. All you have to do is listen. When you look at those spreadsheets from the FBI, Kaiser Permanente, even the CDC or these other groups, if it's a reliable source, there should always be a data tab. And on that tab, they will tell you things like this. Okay, X number of reporting areas don't include race or income or whatever when they send in their statistics. That's why there was a conversation I was going to have yesterday, but then I decided not to. A lot of us as Black women, we have very big personalities, but really, a lot of y'all are goldfish in a sea or an ocean full of sharks. A lot of y'all are worm food and you don't even fucking realize it. A lot of you have people lying in wait, ready to do you in, ready to do you exactly the way those 5 people did Shanquella. But anytime someone tries to warn you, or anytime the Holy Spirit tries to warn you, anytime Spirit says that's the person who doesn't fuck with you, you don't listen. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's not inclusion if it means we have to be erased. Erasure is not inclusion. That's a very good point. Right. It's still worshiping Black men. You're still putting them on a pedestal. And just because they're in a wig and a dress doesn't change the fact that that's a nigga. Okay? Some, but what, and I'm trying to learn about emotional intelligence, so I'm trying not to go off on people that I disagree with. But what we have to deal with is that the average Black woman that deals with colorism deals with it from Black men. Okay? The men that tell Black women that we're not attractive unless we look a certain way or we have certain features, a certain phenotype, normally those are actually Black men doing that. Other races of men that are attracted to Black women, they're attracted to us because of how we look as Black women. And we understand that Black women come in multiple shades. But other races of men love our full lips. They love our noses. They love our eyes. They love our complexion. They love our hair texture. They don't care about whether or not you wear braids, weave, wigs. They love the way you look as a Black woman. So respectfully, it's a lie from the pits of hell that a man of another race would deal with you being colorist or racist. Today's Black woman deals with discrimination within the Black community. And of course, right, I'm not mentally obtuse, so I understand that racism exists. But see, we have laws in place to protect us from racism. But there's nothing in place to protect us from what we deal with as Black women when it comes to what happens when we go through bullshit when dealing with other Black people. There are no hate crime laws if you are a victim of femicide as a Black woman at the hands of a Black man. There are no really specific laws to deal with the fact that some of these Black bitches will do you in too. We have a slew of laws that can protect us against racial discrimination, but like I said, no one, even, do y'all understand that the conversations that take place regarding older Black women would be viewed as age discrimination amongst other groups of women? It's age discrimination to say that a woman has hit the wall because she's 30 or 40 years old. It is also, you know, the way these guys openly talk about the fact that they prefer dealing with girls that are not of legal age. Do you understand that if we were part of a group of people that actually gave a fuck about our kids, all those people would be in jail? It's illegal for those niggas to suggest that they want to deal with 16 and 17-year-old girls. You have Black men on this platform who have gotten like 13 and 14-year-old girls pregnant. That's illegal. It's illegal to promote that. That's violence against children. And it's not white men saying that. It's not Asian men saying that. It's not Latino men saying that. It's not Pacific Islander men saying that. It's Black men saying that. So at this point, we can't be so... Okay, I'm gonna say this in a different way. We can't be so ignorant to our situation that we can't even acknowledge that, okay, the biggest threat to Black women and Black kids is not only Black men, but the Black women who try to police our conversations. Do you understand that other groups of people would have some of these motherfuckers on a federal watch list? All these motherfuckers who suggest that it's okay to violate women and kids would be on a watch list. And the federal government would be monitoring their shit. I was watching something in another sector where you had this guy who, like, he did this video, and frankly, he was verbally abusing his wife. And in the video, he said that he has no problem beating a woman. He has no problem raping women. Do you understand that other groups of people would have had that nigga picked up? There's nothing in the mind of Black people to do that. They take that as conversation, and I'm like, okay, this nigga openly said that he beats his wife, he has no problem hitting other women, and he thinks it's okay to rape women. And I'm watching this and I'm like, it's all these people laughing in the comment section. So people get upset when divestors make certain comments, but nothing that we say is illegal. In the meantime, you have people that literally make statements suggesting that they have no problem attacking people. They have no problem violating people and sexually assaulting them. That's not non-Black people being colorist and racist, sweetheart. That's the niggerdom and niggotry of Black people who violently deal with each other. Now, I hope, you didn't feel any type of way about what I said, but at the same time, your statement was kind of troubling because, again, we're not mentally obtuse. So no one over here is not saying that racism and colorism don't exist. But what we are saying is that the modern day Black woman's major problem comes from men who share our same skin color and women who share our same skin color. And us saying that is not violent. Us saying that is not abusive. I'm gonna get off here. Y'all have a good night.